Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, it's a very, very busy day. Obviously, it's debate night. Much of our coverage will begin this afternoon to head towards that. We'll begin with our special coverage tonight at 7 p.m. and beyond. Then, as we have been till 3 a.m. with debate post-game analysis. Obviously, there is just a ton going on in both the election and in the coronavirus story. Those two stories will continue to dominate our coverage. Obviously, there's some votes on the Supreme Court justice as well today, so plenty to get to. With 12 days to go, let us start with the politics and David Challoner.
Jeff, can you hear me?
Yes, we can,
Jeff?
David.
Okay,
yes,
great.
Yes,
sorry, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So let me just start with the new sound that we've heard from the candidates this morning, 60 Minutes released clips from each candidate. And Biden did that classic Washington thing you do when you don't want to answer a question, you order up a blue ribbon panel. So on this whole notion of court packing, he said he's going to bring together a bipartisan commission of conservative and liberal constitutional scholars to look at overall court reform. He says it's more than just court packing, but should he be president, he would expect a report back in 180 days, and that we can't have a court system that is purely just partisan politics, and whoever gets the most votes gets their way on every court ruling, since judges remain for a generation, politicians come and go. So that is, perhaps if he gets the question again tonight, we now know what his answer is, but that is where he has landed on this constant question about court packing. He has punted, it seems, to a bipartisan commission. For Donald Trump's part, I'm sure this is not the clip he thought would light the world on fire with his release of the 60 Minutes clip, but the 60 Minutes clip that they released with the president and Leslie Stahl is all about the economy, and like she pressed him on his number one domestic priority after doing his usual riff through his preferred economic statistics. He said just getting back to normal, getting the economy to where we were, and then he labeled China as an adversary and a foe. And as he has blamed China for the spread of the virus to all these other countries. So those two clips are out this morning, and perhaps it's a preview of some of what we will hear from the candidates on the debate stage tonight. Before I get to the debate stage, obviously also last night, former President Obama gave a pretty extraordinary closing argument against Donald Trump. It was a near just complete takedown of the president's behavior in office, his inability to take the job seriously, from the pandemic to the economy, and had lots of just sort of elbow jabs there at the TV ratings line and what have you. But clearly Obama was making the argument against Trump in a way that can rile the Democratic base and, of course, get out the vote, which is his critical mission. So there's lots of sound to play with there. Donald Trump is no normal president, and this kind of speech is not normal from a former president about his immediate predecessor, but this is the time that we are living in. And Obama will head out again on the campaign trail Saturday in Miami for the Biden campaign. As for tonight, this is the second and final debate, as you noted, with 12 days to go, Jeff. I mean, this is probably the last thing that the candidates are actually somewhat in control of, that they can prepare for, that they can have some control over. We all know there are events that can occur in the final 11 days of the campaign that are out of the candidate's control, and can have real impact. But but this is one of the last big opportunities that these candidates can actually prepare and control for as they get before tens of millions of Americans. And clearly, the last debate did not go well in Donald Trump's favor. There was, in a remarkably stable presidential race, there was, a noticeable dip for him after that first debate. And so it is, the burden is on him here to try and alter the dynamic in some way at this debate tonight. And you saw Kevin Liptak's reporting about which sort of Donald Trump will show up tonight, which is a big question around sort of how he will conduct himself. And we all know that this new sort of rule enforcement mechanism of muting the microphone during the 2 minutes when you're not speaking at the top of the topic section, he commented on that on the South Lawn yesterday and called that unfair, and he didn't like it. So we will see what kind of Donald Trump shows up on that debate stage tonight. Of course, for Joe Biden, one of the things that the Trump campaign is banking on, which is never a good thing, never a good position to be in, is Joe Biden making some kind of error. Is Joe Biden getting rattled with whatever Donald Trump is going to throw at him? Is Joe Biden, taking a personal slight against his son, if that were to come up, and somehow losing his way in the debate? It's always hard to bank on your opponent making a mistake, but that is something that the Trump campaign is indeed in need of almost. So his job, of course, Biden, is to really do no harm, and his campaign has indicated he wants to use this opportunity, as he did in the first debate, to really try and speak directly to the American people about the issues that matter most to them: coronavirus, the economy, building back the economy. So that kicks off for 90 minutes at 9 p.m. Eastern in Nashville at Belmont University. We had Jessica Dean up this morning there and throughout the day, and then Jim Acosta and Arlette Saenz pick up for alternating hours in the lead up to the debate and after. And I think that's where we start.
Okay. Let's do Washington, and then let's open it up and talk politics and elections and Trump and Biden, the Supreme Court, and all of that. Washington, please.
Okay, so just to clean up on a couple things here. So this 16 Minutes interview, Trump has now just put out a tweet this morning saying that he is going to put out the full Leslie Stahl interview unedited. Brian Stelter is available on this. CBS, as part of this, is saying the White House agreed to record for archive only, not for political purposes. So there's that whole angle on it. And we're not clear exactly at what time we'll see this, but it's likely we'll see it at some point today. On the voting story, so obviously after this Obama appearance last night, shortly thereafter, there was a hastily convened 7:30 p.m. presser from Radcliffe and Wray saying that bringing into question Iran and Russia and claiming that Iran is behind these intimidating emails to voters that we have been reporting on, linking to the Proud Boys. The issue is that Radcliffe, he said they were sent to Democrats, and the question is why these were, he said, helped Trump. It is unclear why they did, because he didn't offer any evidence. And if they were sent to Democrats, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But also the bigger issue, which is that Russia is the far more sophisticated player in all of this. And Radcliffe spent little time, Ray, talking about Russia and what they were up to and how they were getting access to voting rolls. This comes also as Ray, who Clapper this morning called the Fauci of the intel community, said that people should not be concerned about their vote and supported the voting system, which, of course, as we know, has Ray in the president's sights in terms of his unhappiness with him. So, and then on top of that all, there was a joint intel report statement issued last night, throwing some cold water all over this, saying that we urge Americans to be very skeptical about unverified reports. So that's the intel of it all. In terms of the numbers, 41 million have voted. That's 89% of the early votes for the whole of 2016, 30% of the total vote for 2016, and we're still 12 days away. To note that the Democrats' lead in these early voting is starting to narrow from absentee to as the early vote starts getting put in. That includes states like North Carolina and Florida. And then Pam and Kristen have some reporting on poll watchers and what each side is planning to do for that. So they're up on that today. On SCOTUS, you mentioned the 9 a.m. Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. The Democrats are going to boycott it. They plan to fill the seats with pictures of people who are going to be impacted by the loss of Obamacare. Republicans are expected to get out of the maneuver by being able to move forward with the vote, even though there is no quorum. Just two other things to note. There's this Christie very strong op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this morning, wear it or regret it, as I did in terms of mask. Those in positions of power have a duty to get the message out. Those who deny science undermine the reopening of the country. And then lastly on this will never go away and never get done stimulus bill, Pelosi just said that they're on a good path, that she and Mnuchin could soon be doing legislative language. Again, that does not take into account what the senators and Mitch McConnell would do. And that's what we got.
Yeah, there's a ton in that. By the way, just as an aside, with all due respect to Christie, he may say that, but he doesn't call out the names and, really tries to be tough and firm there without being so. Anyway, okay. There's so much on the election side and Washington and Supreme Court and stimulus and Obama and debate and all of this and election interference and John Radcliffe and all of this. So before we get to coronavirus today, let's open it up and get some thoughts on any of those topics or anything else anybody sees.
Couple of things, Jeff. One is I assume everyone's coming up with a plan for how they deal with the White House releasing that 60 Minutes tape, but we all know that there's a decent chance they might edit some of it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So I think we have to be. I think that frankly, I think we have to be totally suspect of anything the White House releases, and I'm not sure we should even be playing this game.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is why do we think that Biden's answer on the Supreme Court question is a punt? Maybe he actually means it, since we used to do things like this all the time for very important issues like saving the American judiciary.
So it was David Chalian who disagrees with you. So Senator Chalian, please respond to Congressman Murphy.
I'm just saying, he's been facing a question about whether or not he supports court packing. He says he's not a fan, and he'll give an answer on it, and his answer is a commission. I think it's fine for you to believe that that's real, and he believes in court reform, and he should do it, but it is not actually coming out in support of opposition and answering the question he was asked. That's what I mean by the punt on it.
Yeah, well, maybe the commission will decide that the court needs to expand. All I'm saying is I don't see why we would be completely cynical about that, since it's like a smart, old-fashioned, very American way of dealing with a very big issue that's deeply dividing the country.
Yeah, just like it solved our debt crisis.
Okay. The debt crisis panel did happen, and nobody did anything about it. All I'm saying is we've done these things in the past. We created the entire post-9/11 world because of a commission's work. There are times when we have national commissions that actually do real work. He might actually mean it. That's all I'm saying.
Hi, this is Robin Turner here from CNNI. I just had a quick thought on that. I wonder if we should even be using the term court packing. I think it's a very loaded term. It's not really neutral, and I don't think we should take a position on it. And we've never taken a position on it before. I mean, certainly the argument could be made that Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party have transformed the judiciary over the last 4 years, and we haven't called that court packing.
I think that's a very fair question. It's a fair question that I'd ask David Chalian and Rick and Calvin and Tim to think about. I think it's worth talking about.
Hey, Jeff, it's David. Just a couple thoughts on that. I agree with the previous point that was just made because I feel like we're buying into a political narrative when we say that. Yeah, but I think that stepping aside from that, when the Supreme Court went from 9 to 7 justices, it was because the Republicans at the time were afraid they were going to lose control of the court. When they won back control, they went back from 7 to 9 justices. So, and since then, the number of district courts has increased by over 500%. The population of the country has gone from 50 million to 330 million. And the number of Supreme Court cases that the court actually hears every year has gone down for 20 years. So, and the number of circuits has gone from 9, which was why we had 9 justices back then, to 13 if you count the addition of the federal circuit and the DC circuit. There are also very practical reasons to ask whether 9 justices are enough for a 500% increase in district courts in a country that's 270 million people more than it was at the time we said 9 justices was okay. And I think we're missing that point because we're just looking at the politics of it.
Yeah. So David, you've been making this point for a few weeks, and I think you're spot on. So how I think we should handle this, because we have not really gotten at it, and I think you're totally right, is I'd like John Avlon in a reality check. Doesn't have to be for tomorrow because you're probably going to be on the debate, which is fine. But I think that if John could really try to tackle what David's raising here, I think it's a really well-founded point. And to the previous point that Robin brought up about whether or not we should be calling this court packing, I do think some guidance on that. I mean, obviously it's the shorthand for the way people talk about this, but I do think some guidance on that would be helpful.
Hey, Jeff, it's to me, I mean, the very basic way of explaining court packing by losing the political sense of it is just court expansion.
Exactly.
That's what it is. I think Robin brings up a really good point, and I think we should change it.
Okay, so Tim, why don't you just consult with your colleagues and put out some guidance about that, please?
You got it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Other thoughts? Thank you, Robin, for bringing that up, by the way. Other thoughts?
Hey, Jeff, I just want to add
that Biden's talking about isn't necessarily just about expansion. It might include, we don't know yet, about everything from age limits to how the appointment gets done and goes through the Senate. I mean, he didn't limit it to the expansion or how many justices are on the court. Isn't that correct, David?
Yes. Yeah. So you're siding with the congressman from New York as opposed to Senator Chalian.
I'm siding with neither. I'm just talking about what the essence of what the statement is. I'm not saying it's not a cop-out. I think it probably is a cop-out. I'm with David on that. But I do think that you do that 10 days before the election. No, that's a cop-out. But in terms of what the commission would do, he didn't limit it to the expansion part.
Michael was trying to speak. Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because the one thing about this is a Republican talking point that the media has become obsessed with getting an absolute answer from Joe Biden on, basically exercising the Republican talking point over and over and over again. And if you want to think about this, here's the bottom line. This is pure politics. It's politics that the Republicans are pushing to try to get everyone to ask Biden this question. It's pure politics on Biden's part not to fully answer it. And to call this a cop-out is not a fair assessment of it either. Just like I totally agree with what was said about the word packing. I think that's not a fair, and as Kamala Harris pointed out, Mitch McConnell's put the 50 top judicial positions filled by the Republican senators over the last 4 years. They're all white men, or all white anyway. I don't know if they're all men. So is that packing the court, by putting all whites in the top 50 judicial positions in the country outside of the Supreme Court? But anyway, it's pure politics. Remember Bernie Sanders a couple months ago said, when asked about his differences with Biden on things like health care and the environment and stuff, more left.
he said, you know what, we got to beat Trump right now. We'll get to the infighting and then the party later. Multiple people have said that. And so what Joe Biden is doing is he's trying to keep a lid on the internal fighting among Democrats until he tries to win this election in a few days. And answering that question doesn't do that. Answering that question could keep people from voting. It could keep people from voting. It could cause people to vote against him. It could cause them to vote for a third-party candidate if he doesn't answer the way that they want him to answer. So what he's doing is, it's not a cop-out. It's smart politics not to answer that question and divide the party further. And again, even Bernie Sanders and others have said, hey, we'll fight later if we win, but the most important thing is to beat Trump. So instead of calling it a cop-out and is Biden going to pack the court and all these things that are essentially political talking points for the other side, why not even assess it as, hey, this is smart political strategy to try to keep the Democratic Party together until they try to win this election on November 3rd. Then they can have all the fighting they want. Once they win, if they do, they can have all the fighting they want about whether or not to back the court. And if they lose, it's moot anyway. There's no chance to do it. So again, this is political strategy. It's pure politics. It seems unfair that we are so obsessed with it and calling it a cop-out and other things, when in fact, as Jim said, maybe this is the kind of thing that would be done in a normal time. We're not in a normal time, but Joe Biden is actually suggesting things that used to be thought of as, wow, that's a smart idea. So again, I just think that's, I think that it's way overdone in terms of the media's obsession with it. And again, it's a Republican pressure point, a Republican talking point to try to divide the Democratic Party. Why would we do that?
Okay, other thoughts? Anyone else?
I have another thing I want to talk about, Jeff, that's not related to this if we're moving on from the court.
Sure. Yeah,
just on the when Trump was sick, we had a bunch of reporting that advisors around him were talking about him trying to use being sick himself to change the course of the conversation on coronavirus, that it was a real opportunity for him. And when I read the Chris Christie op-ed, I thought, wow, this is the op-ed that all those advisors wish Donald Trump had written in a way. Now, I totally agree with you that Chris Christie, I'll use the word cop-out on Chris Christie here, copped out by not naming Trump and calling Trump out specifically. Totally agree with that. But I just think the messaging in it is so interesting because Chris Christie, who was sick like Trump and in the hospital, very similar path, did the cocktail, did the remdesivir, all that stuff, came out and wrote this. And this is really the message that all those Trump people were hoping he would give as he came out of Walter Reed. Instead, in like 10 seconds, he said, don't let it dominate you, and all that other stuff, ripped off his mask, recorded campaign videos, I'm Superman, blah, blah, blah. So he didn't do any of that. But I just think there's an interesting conversation here about this op-ed is the message that all those Trump advisors that we reported on when Trump was sick, were hoping he would deliver, that probably would have helped him course correct a little bit on the virus and probably would have narrowed the polls instead of keeping them stretched. And so I just think there's an opportunity to have a conversation about that. Again, Chris Christie copped out by not literally calling out Trump, but the message is what he should have been delivering if he was being smart about it coming out of having his own bout with coronavirus.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, for sure. Other thoughts? Anyone else? I do think the Obama laying into Trump yesterday was incredibly strategic for the Biden campaign. Very interesting. They did it very calculated on the day before the debate because it gives Trump less time to respond to that. He's not going to be out doing a rally tonight to respond. And I do think that we should continue to highlight what Obama said. Any other thoughts? Okay. Then let's move to domestic and coronavirus.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So not a good sign. The highest day for death numbers in weeks, more than 1,100 deaths and more than 62,000 cases reported just yesterday. But just so we're not taking too much away from any one day, consider this. For the first week in a while, fully half of the states on the CNN map are showing deaths up week over week. And with the U.S. death toll, over 222,000, a pretty stunning new assessment of just how costly the faltering U.S. response has been. The National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia, with a new study, it finds 130,000 to 210,000 avoidable U.S. deaths, blaming things like insufficient testing, lack of mask mandates, and mocking basic public health practices. Probably one of the strongest arguments for masks yet, this significant CDC update on the definition of, quote, close contact to include repeated short exposures to someone, not just 15 minutes all at once. Also, a bunch of vaccine developments on the move today. Moderna and Pfizer meeting with an FDA vaccine advisory committee. The Warp Speed chief expecting AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson trials to resume in the U.S. this week. And on this death of that volunteer in the AstraZeneca trial in Brazil, Brazilian media reporting he was a frontline doctor treating COVID patients in Rio, that he got a placebo, not the vaccine, and got sick 2 months later from COVID. We're working with International to match or attribute some of those details. Looking at key regions and key data points. Again, on our map, cases rising in 31 states, not a single state in the continental U.S. going in the right direction, just Hawaii, and just by a little bit. The average of new cases in America daily is up almost 40% in the last month. Hospitalizations topping 40,000 as several states sound the alarm about hospital capacity and set records here. Ohio, Kansas, New Mexico, and Wyoming reported their highest number of cases in the pandemic yesterday. There was another big Midwest nursing home outbreak. We talked about that Kansas case earlier in the week. Kansas City in Missouri says 142 people tested positive. 3 died from an outbreak at one facility there. And Wisconsin has now admitted the first patient into that new overflow field hospital. Adrian brought us in Chicago on the Midwest surges. And then has this just all become too big for contact tracing? In North Dakota, which is the highest per capita state in the country, the governor announced it's suspending all official contact tracing, asking residents to do it themselves because National Guard contact tracers are needed for other things. Cites a lack of compliance, just too many cases to trace. And while this is the only official announcement like this, experts say this is probably in reality happening all over. The Northeast keeps getting more troubling news. New Jersey says hospitalizations are the highest in 3 months. The governor himself quarantining after some senior advisors test positive. Rhode Island's governor says the state is not in a good place. And down south, North Carolina will not advance its reopening phase as things go in the wrong direction. And we've got Nick Valencia in Atlanta. On schools, a major district pulling back from in-person schooling, and this one is really hitting the most vulnerable students. It's in Boston, which started reopening in phases at the beginning of the month, and it was 3,000 high-need students who were going in person, with more scheduled to come soon. Now all that's off and remote. 5 New York City schools are on a 14-day shutdown, and Michigan reporting about 450 cases. As the state surges overall. And we've got Biana and Evan on the education line. From health on vaccines, Azar elaborating, filling out the picture a little more on the vaccine timeline. He suspects the first doses for the most vulnerable in December, and then seniors and healthcare workers and first responders in January, and then wide availability in March and April. As I said, the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee meets all day today. We'll watch for news there. No big decisions likely, but we may get some more details on safety and next steps and that kind of thing. We've got Sanjay, Elizabeth, and Jacqueline available. Just a couple of other notable storylines. We've talked a lot and we've tracked a lot of church-related concerns. Both North Carolina and Maine are tying scores of cases and several deaths to separate church indoor services. That continues to be an issue. And then college sports continues to be an issue as well. The Florida Gators football team with 26 cases closing facilities all week. And we've got the wrap piece today on COVID. Erica Hill at 3 and 5 today. And that's
okay. Yep. Thank you, Matthew. Does anybody have any thoughts on COVID? Then, Matthew, do you want to finish domestic, please?
Yeah, developing at this hour possible more answers, long sought after answers for victims of Jeffrey Epstein, these transcripts of interviews with the alleged sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell, just unsealed, our team going through them. They come from the depositions in the Maxwell Giuffre case. She's accused, of course, of aiding his abuse. And I believe New York just alerted out some details on Maxwell refusing to answer a whole bunch of questions about sexual activity. More to come on that. Kara Scannell available for TV on that one. We're watching 61 large wildfires in 13 states. Mandatory new evacuations near Boulder, Colorado. 40,000-foot smoke plume reported. And just a couple of other quick things we'll keep an eye on at 4 o'clock. National Day of Protests Against Police Brutality, monitoring cities all over the country, scheduling protests, including Louisville, where obviously all of this Breonna Taylor news has just happened. And then archaeologists making this major discovery in their search for victims of the 1921 Tulsa massacre, finding a mass grave with at least 10 coffins, now working to confirm if they were in fact victims of the racial murders. We'll watch for developments there. And I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. International.
Hi, yeah, we're mainly focused on the U.S. politics, but COVID-wise, we've got Nick Robertson reporting on the Ireland story that I mentioned yesterday, now in the strictest lockdown in Europe. He looks at the challenges for businesses, mental health, and how the government is using the message, take the pain now so you can enjoy Christmas, so he's on that. Scott McLean is looking at the record numbers across Europe, just generally focused on Europe and the numbers there. Fred Pleitgen is available on the news that was mentioned earlier about Iran and Russia being accused of U.S. election interference, but he's also available to talk about the Sputnik vaccine and how that's apparently 3 months behind other vaccine models. And Ivan Watson has a good piece looking at how COVID is impacting child trafficking in India, a huge increase there. He speaks to two teenagers who were rescued in a raid. Those are the COVID stories. Just a couple of other ones to flag. We saw the news that the Pope came out and supported same-sex civil union yesterday. Delia Gallagher is on that. And we continue to cover these protests in Nigeria. We've now got a prison that's on fire. The situation there is really unraveling, and it's a really big story for the region. So Eleni Diokos is on that.
Thank you, Mira. Business.
Jeff, good morning. Stocks searching for direction this morning. All eyes on the labor market as 787,000 Americans filed for first-time jobless benefits. This was better than expected, below 800,000, first time since March. Layoffs, though, remaining stubbornly high 7 months into the crisis. Right now, over 23 million Americans on unemployment aid. And of course, as Virginia mentioned this morning, the president in that preview clip from CBS defending the economy, saying it's the greatest economy in the history of the world. Romans has been really sharp on this today, noting that the president continues to paint a false picture that he created the greatest economy. It's not true now. He's down 3.9 million jobs during his presidency. It also wasn't true before the pandemic. We know jobs growth in the Trump administration trailed that of the Obama administration. He never got the supercharged economic growth that he promised through deregulation and tax cuts. Christine Roman, Julia Chatterley, and Christina Alessi up and available on all those threads. This morning, though, because of all those economic fears, economists, as well as a bipartisan group of former Commerce secretaries endorsing Joe Biden this morning. And of course, we are watching stimulus talks closely. We're focusing on two sectors right now that are begging D.C. for stimulus. That is the restaurant and airline industry. Vanessa Yurkevich filed a piece this morning looking at how smaller restaurants are shuttering their doors en masse. They are asking help for D.C. with the rise in coronavirus cases and colder weather setting in. 2.3 million restaurant workers still out of the job. One owner telling her that he's burned through his PPP loan and begging the federal government for help, and he's on the cusp of laying off his entire staff. We're also watching, as I mentioned, the airline industry. Doug Parker, American Airlines CEO, on CNBC this morning, saying he's going to continue to fight aggressively in D.C. to bring back furloughed workers. And of course, we got a peek at the health of the U.S. airline industry this morning with earnings. Southwest saying it posted its biggest loss ever since the coronavirus pandemic set in, and American reported a $2.8 billion loss in the third quarter. Pete Montine is available on all those threads. And in non-COVID news, we're tracking this new ad that is set to air during tonight's debate from a group dubbed Accountable Tech. It's a 30-second ad taking aim at Mark Zuckerberg that begins with Zuckerberg saying he wants his girls to grow up and be proud of him for what he has built at Facebook. And then the ad cuts to Facebook's failures to curb hate on its platform. And as Tony mentioned, it's an effective ad underscoring the distance between Zuckerberg's words and the actions of Facebook. And moments ago, I just alerted that Senate Republicans have authorized subpoenas of both the Facebook and Twitter CEOs. The motion was set by the Senate Judiciary Committee. This obviously amid mounting conservative criticism of tech content. And Brian Fung is up on that, and that's where we begin.
Okay. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up before we move to digital?
Just to note that Amy Coney Barrett is out of Senate Judiciary 12-0 with no Democrats there.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Digital?
Okay, Jeff, we had 31 million uniques yesterday. Our top 5 stories were all in the politics realm, not surprisingly. Saliza on the Trump 60 Minutes walkout. Collinson on Trump lashing out in the final days of this campaign. Not surprisingly, Obama rebuke of Trump yesterday, more than 1 million uniques and 5 minutes of engagement. Trump 60 Minutes news story, and then the Melania Trump unprecedented absence from the campaign trail. Right now, we've got the Collinson lead on with more than 15,000 uniques on it, and it leads with the Obama takedown and goes forward to the debate tonight. And really worth noting, the full Obama video is at more than 10,000 uniques and almost a minute engagement. So the audience is really there for that story. Tonight, we will be all over, of course, the final Donald Trump's final debate. Win or lose, he won't be in another presidential debate. This is it for him. We have pregame walk-ups, we have game on DLE, and we have postgame all the highlights. Second story we'll keep following, of course, is Donald J. Trump versus Leslie Stahl. All the follows on that. We have up still high the Ratcliffe and Ray presser, and very importantly, we have packaged that with the clapper on our air, giving important context to that story. Coronavirus, other big story. The fall surge is here. Some states seeing all-time case records already, and it's about to get worse. We have a feature on food banks being strapped and kind of caught in a triple whammy of greater need, rising food prices, and a harder food pipeline that they're dealing with. And we're going to pair that with a business story we have on the precarity of Americans amid this pandemic and going into the election. It's a really tough time to be an average American right now. Finally, we have the follow on the 545 immigrant kids who are separated from their parents. Catherine Shoykett goes along with a group searching for those parents, and it's really dramatic and emotional reporting. And actually, we also have a Google follows, really smart Google follows from business on why it's so hard to dethrone Google, and also a piece on Google's defense against antitrust. It's you. And finally, we had a rousing debate here and also on the digital Slack channel this morning on court packing and what that means. And we have an op-ed from Mr. Kamal Bell on CNN Digital on why it's not court packing, but saving representative democracy. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. John.
Good morning, Jeff. So Jessica Dean from Nashville will be leading shows with a huge push to tonight's debate and just all the questions about what to expect, what Trump shows up. His advisors telling us this morning he's going to answer the questions that he wants to answer, the role of the new Mike rule, Jeremy Diamond will be from the White House, but Trump does leave at 1 o'clock, and we'll see if he takes questions. David Chalian with his debate cheat sheet, what to watch for. Abby Phillip, John Avlon, Jeff Zeleny throughout the morning on the debate, and Biden and his court's answer. And then we are doing separate segments on Obama's role in attack mode as Biden's most vocal surrogate. Lots of sound from last night that we will be replaying. Douglas Brinkley, David Swerdlick on that. We do have Biden surrogate Cedric Richmond with John King, and we'll continue to do our Path 270 segments throughout the day. John King building out some special ones on the magic wall for his hours. On coronavirus, Elizabeth Cohen and Michael Osterholm, Sarah Shapur, CDC, Rochelle Walensky, the rising cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, trends, disturbing trends in all three areas. Redfield noted that last night. Adrian Broad is out of Chicago, kind of wrapping up some of these other headlines. The Wyoming National Guard story on contact tracing that Matthew mentioned is a good one. Make sure that's part of it. Next hour, we do have Boston's mayor on the school rollback and going to all to virtual learning. Brianna has Dr. Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University. He's one of the researchers behind that study that's getting so much pickup this morning about just the huge number of avoidable deaths if certain things were done right earlier on. So we'll give that some time. On election interference, Alex Marquardt and Evan Perez on what we learned last night, and then Miles Taylor and Elizabeth Newman on all the questions and the political questions surrounding Ratcliffe. Kristen Holmes stays on the huge early vote, the Alabama curbside ruling. That later this hour, we do have the Ohio Secretary of State facing a lot of blowback from Democrats for kind of speeding up the vote count timeline. And finally, we just did have someone up to mark the Barrett vote to get her out of committee.
Okay, thank you, John. Washington?
Good morning. On the lead today, we'll also be looking ahead to the debate, Trump, Biden, the 60 Minutes clips, the comments from President Obama, Biden's answer on expanding the Supreme Court, and which Trump will show up tonight. We've got Jeremy Diamond at the White House, Arlette Saenz at the debate, and a panel for analysis on all those things. Alex Marquardt joins on the Russian and Iranian election interference, and we'll talk to James Stavridis about kind of setting the table if this is real or just political spin. Pamela Brown outlines that as well in the voting wrap, which will go at 4 o'clock. Erica Hill has our COVID wrap. That's at 3, followed by Dr. Walensky. We'll have Sanjay at 4, focusing on the administration's faulty COVID response, maybe leading to more deaths, the Chris Christie mask op-ed, and all the big picture numbers from across the country. With the new jobless claims, we'll go to the Hill, get the latest on the stimulus bill, and follow on Amy Coney Barrett's vote. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is booked at 4 o'clock, and Harry Enton stays on the path to 270.
And in the Situation Room, we'll obviously be pushing heavily to tonight's debate as well, with just 12 days to go before the election. We'll get into all of the latest threads around both campaigns leading up to it, the 60 Minutes clip released on Trump about the economy and China being an adversary, Biden 60 Minutes clip on the court, and the overall questions about strategy and what to expect tonight. We'll also follow, we did a lot on Obama last night, obviously, but we'll follow on the strategy behind that there and what it means for Biden. We'll continue analyzing the path to 270 with 41 million early votes cast so far. And we'll have our voting wrap piece from Pam Brown. We'll see what else we learn today about this election threat from Russia and Iran. And we will be following on stimulus talks. On COVID, obviously, this continued surge, more than 1,000 deaths yesterday, half the states up over last week in deaths. And this new study showing that 130 to 210,000 deaths could have been saved if it weren't for this out of the White House. And we'll also get into that Christie op-ed. So we have our Erica Hill rap piece. We have our international whip. And then just some guests of note, we just confirmed Meadows will join us. We have got Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and we have Rick Bright. And that's where we're starting.
Thank you very much, Emily. Okay, does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
Hey, Jeff, I just want to make sure that the early voting, we talked a lot about this, but I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the lines and talking to the people in the lines. And I think it's also an opportunity today to hear from voters who are voting. Well, I guess they're voting today. They're going to vote before the debate, but just what they're looking for are they going to, in the debate tonight, and then tomorrow, their reactions to it. It's a good way to get people's instant reactions to the debate. But I mean, these numbers continue to be so extraordinary. And I would just emphasize, while we should keep talking about those numbers and how high they are and the percentages compared of states to 2016 to now, et cetera, that even more important is this opportunity to talk to America on these lines from all walks of life, from both sides of the political spectrum. It's just an opportunity that we don't get that often, to have them right in front of us and be able to hear America's voices so clearly. They're right there for us.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, so obviously today is driving towards tonight and tonight's debate. Our special coverage begins at 7 p.m. Everything should be driving towards that. Big night. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.